Hello, thank you for clicking on this video. I am Dean Rod Vera, and today we'll talk about the Bouncing Cheques Law, or BP 22. Welcome back. Again, today in this video, we'll talk about BP 22 or Batasan Pambansa 22, or otherwise known as the Bouncing Cheques Law. But before we get into the nitty gritty of the law, we need to do some explanation, some definitions. First, what is a check? A check is a negotiable instrument that is in writing, it is made payable to order, and it's drawn against a third person, maybe a bank, ordering that third person, the bank, to pay the addressee of the check. The check must be signed, paid to the order of. It must be signed, dated, and it must be issued to the person that you're giving it to. Now, what is a check? Technically, as aside from being a negotiable instrument, a check is a type of negotiable instrument called a bill of exchange, meaning it is a document, a negotiable instrument wherein there are three parties: the one that issued it, the drawer, the drawee, the bank, and the addressee, or the one who it's payable to. In order for it to be considered as a bill of exchange, the promise to pay must be unconditional, meaning all it says in the check is pay to the order of, and that person's name is written on the check. Now, there's different regulations to the check. So, as of May 2024, your checks must be the new version. So make sure that you go to your bank and ask them if the checks that you have are the current versions which are allowed to be issued. Now, to support the explanations I give today in this video, I'm going to list down in the description the cases which I used for the research on for this video. Now, BP 22 is a criminal statute, meaning it is a criminal offense if you issue the check that bounces, or meaning that when the check is presented for payment or deposited, there are no funds or insufficient funds. Hence, the check bounced. Now, you must remember that a check is involving money. In a criminal offense, especially for bouncing checks, there is the criminal aspect and there's the civil aspect. The civil aspect is easy to explain. This is the debt or the money you owe, or the money that is you're obligated to pay the addressee of the check, the payee, if you will. That's why you issue the check, because you owe that person money or that money is deserving to that payee. Of course, if the check bounces, you still owe that person the money. In the criminal aspect of BP 22, what is being punished is the issuance of a worthless check. It has been determined that even though it's just a piece of paper, it has basically no worth. It's not technically currency. But the system or the abuse of issuing bouncing checks destroys the financial system. As you know, in the financial system here in this country and also in the world, checks must be trusted and relied on. Now, if the check is not trusted, then people will not trust the system. What is being punished because of issuing the worthless checks? You are putting these worthless checks, paper that is worth nothing, no value, in circulation. Because a check, as a negotiable instrument, can be passed around as an evidence or a form of payment. So by issuing worthless checks, you destroy the whole financial system. And that's why what is being punished is not exactly that you don't have any money or that you're not paying your debt. It is because you issued a worthless piece of paper. Now, again, in the Constitution, no person can be imprisoned for debt. But in BP 22, it's not the debt that you don't pay that's being punished, it's the issuance of a check that has no money in it. It's for the issuance of a check that has no value. Now, I talked about the civil action and the criminal action. Normally, in most criminal offenses, most crimes, you can, as an offended person, meaning the one that was hurt or the one that was damaged or the one was the victim of the crime, you can both file the criminal action and the civil action separately. Because under the law, a crime, there is compensation for the damages. But specifically for BP 22, it is in the law that the civil action is deemed included in the criminal action, and there can be no splitting of the criminal and civil actions. But the Supreme Court has determined that it is possible to split the actions if you file the civil aspect or the civil action for the debt before you file the criminal action on the bouncing checks. Again, it is separate, the check and the debt. I will again explain to you the elements of BP22. What are the elements? Elements are factual circumstances that, if all have happened, all the elements have occurred and were done by the accused, then a crime has been committed by the accused, meaning all the elements must have been either performed or acted on by the accused. Now, what are the elements for bouncing checks or VP22? Basically, there are three elements. The first element is the making and drawing and issuing the check, meaning the check must be written, must be drawn, and must be given to the person you're addressing the check to, the person who will deposit that check, meaning there must be a physical delivery of that check to the person. You made the check, you wrote it, and you gave it to the person. Element number one. What is element number two? Element number two is the knowledge that you know that the time the check was going to be deposited, either there was no money or there was insufficient funds. So, meaning that, let's say the check is dated November 3 or November 4, you know that on that day there was not enough balance or zero balance to cover the amount of the check. That is the second element. This is important because there are requirements for the second element to succeed. What is the third element? The third element is the dishonor, the bouncing of the check. So again, here are the three elements. The making, the issuance of the check, the knowledge that there was not enough funds for the check, that's number two, and number three, the bounce or the dishonor of the check. Now, BP22 gave a condition, a requirement for element number two, the knowledge that there was not enough funds or there was no funds. Now, this is important to know for the second element to succeed in the prosecution of bouncing checks. For the presumption or the prima facie element that there was insufficient funds, knowing that the maker of the issue of the check knew that there was no money in the bank, there must be certain conditions again. So sub-conditions, sub-facts for the second element. Number one, the check must be given or presented to the bank within 90 days of the issuance date. So there's 90 days for the check to be deposited. That's condition number one. Condition number two is that the drawer of the check, the one who issued the check, must have been given notice that the check bounced. So meaning the one who issued the check must be given notice, and it must be a written notice that, hey, Mr. Drawer of the check bounced. That's very important. Now, the third element is important because the law provides an escape clause. The escape clause is this: after knowledge of the bouncing of the check, the drawer of the check or the issuer of the check is given 5 days in which to deposit or fulfill the amount of the check. Meaning that escape clause allows the issuer of the check to fulfill the obligation so that the check can push through. That is the law. There is an escape clause in the bouncing checks law. Now, you must remember there's two conditions for that second element, knowledge of the insufficiency of funds. So the first one is that it must be given within 90 days of the issuance of the check. The second condition is that the drawer or the issuer of the check was given written notice that the check bounced. And the third condition is that the person had enough time, 5 days, in which to deposit the check or at least pay the obligation or the amount or the face value of the check. Without that condition, element number two is not proven. Now remember, as a disclaimer, this video is not legal advice, but it's only done for educational purposes so that at least those who watch this video know how not to commit the crime of bouncing checks. Hi, please do me a favor and smash that like button. It'll help me a lot and it will trigger the YouTube algorithm. Now, if you have not yet, please subscribe to my channel. If you don't, my dog will eat this exam booklet and that student has to repeat his final exam again.